Welcome, welcome everybody. Super excited. Our last creator session of 2022.
I'm honored. Thank you.
I know, yeah. I'm like, we're ending on an extremely high note. Again, no pun intended. Lots of silly music puns for me today. So I'm really excited to introduce very extremely talented photographer. You've seen her work already. I guarantee that. I've seen her work everywhere. Really excited to introduce her today, and hopefully you learned something new and interesting. So welcome, Nesrin.
Thank you. Yeah, really excited to chat with you guys today. It's pretty informal. We have a run of show on the next slide, but I'm just kind of going to be going over a brief history of my photo career for those of you who haven't ever seen my work or just wanted to hear more about it, the different facets of my work, because I think that's kind of the most interesting thing that I do is I shoot just about everything. And then some tips on expanding your horizons, like breaking out of that comfort zone or whatever box that you've put yourself in kind of. And then at the end, we're going to be doing a Q&A just because I feel like the most valuable photography education is really Q&A, because everyone has questions and you're not going to get those answers unless you specifically ask it. So yeah, I'm more than happy to answer stuff at the end. But we'll just hop into it then.
Let's get started.
Okay, so hey besties, this is me. My name is Nesrin. I am 27 years old. I grew up in Oregon and I went to Portland State University. So I lived in Portland for college, and then a couple years after I lived there for 7 or 8 years. And now I'm based in Los Angeles. A lot of people know me for music photography stuff, just because that was heavily part of my career for years. I mean, that's what I started doing photography in, and really branding myself as a music photographer. But I do it all now. I do portraits. I do a lot of celebrity, personal photography stuff. I shoot lifestyle stuff and brand campaigns and events for some really big companies. Recently, somehow I've also found myself doing food photography for one of my clients. So truly, I do it all. And on top of that, I do social media consulting and stuff behind the scenes for brands. And I also do influencer stuff. So I work with brands on the front end, I'm representing a brand. Yeah, so just all around photographer, social media personality, doing it all. And I'm going to kind of walk you guys through my photo career and highlight some tips on branching out in your work, stuff that I myself did to just grow as an artist and become more well-rounded. So when I was asked to come up with a topic for this presentation, here's the thing, I do a lot of speaking engagement things, and they're all basically about music photography. And I was let me do something that kind of encapsulates my career more, because at this point, music photography isn't the only thing I do anymore. And so I wanted to talk about the idea of feeling boxed in, because I felt this a couple times in my career. And I think that's where a lot of my growth comes from, is because I never want to are they doing construction outside my apartment? I'm so sorry, guys. I never want to feel like I can only do one type of photography, because I felt like that a couple ways before, and I didn't like it, and I wanted to branch out, and I wanted to just shoot anything I was interested in. So a little bit about that. I started photography in the heyday of Instagram. If you were there, you will remember. Everyone was only taking one picture, and it was a white girl standing on top of a mountain with her blonde hair blowing in the wind. So everyone else was taking that picture, so I was also taking that picture, and it was fine, and I took some nice photos at that time in my life, but I also just didn't feel very connected to my work, or fulfilled, or I was doing it. I was okay, I've taken this picture of this same girl 50 times, can we do something else? And I just felt this stigma of oh, well, if you're not shooting the way that all these Instagram photographers think is cool, you're not really cool. And so I don't know, I just felt pressured. And eventually I got myself out of that box by breaking into music photography, which was super fun and exciting for me, and something that I felt very fulfilled doing, just because growing up, I wasn't able to go to a lot of shows and stuff. I grew up in a way smaller town in Oregon, and that just wasn't an option for me. And when I was in college and I was shooting shows all the time, I was like, oh my God, like this is what I want to do. I want to be a tour photographer. I want to do this full time. And yeah, it felt really good. But there was also this stigma in the music photography community where it's like, if you're not shooting artists all the time and you're not on tour and you're not this and that, like it's not enough. And I was also like on Instagram posting photos of myself and like doing brand deals and all this stuff. And that was kind of like looked down upon as like corny or like whatever. And I was like, okay, well, why can't I do both? Why can't I do all of these things? And I kind of just realized I had to stop caring what people thought in order to like grow as an artist, because I was like, okay, I'm doing all this other stuff. I can't be concerned about what is like the norm in certain photography communities. And I really felt like I found more of myself when I started shooting stuff I was really passionate about. I started shooting a lot of girls that looked like me, like Black girls, mixed girls. And that to me made me feel more connected to my work. It was much more personal and like fulfilling to see myself represented in my own work, like shooting girls with like my skin tone and my hair texture and like all of that. Like to me, I was just like, okay, I love this. And so that brought me into doing portraits a lot more. And even with music stuff, I had worked with men for a very long time. I worked in rap and hip hop, like right when I got into music photography. And like, as fun as that was, I was like, why am I just taking all these fantastic photos of dudes? Like, I don't know. So I pivoted because I was like, I want to help women like have really dope visuals and like, you know, create that like storytelling aspect for like female artists. And so I started working with a lot of female pop artists. And again, that's something where I was like, okay, I found my groove here. It's feeling really good. And just like being cognizant of like breaking out of the boxes that I had felt myself in, felt really good and grew me a lot as an artist. So today we're going to talk about that and some other boxes that I feel like I have broken out of more recently, and then how you guys can kind of expand your work too. This is some of my more recent concert work. I feel like just by looking at all these photos, you obviously get the vibe of my work, my music stuff. Some of these are artist portraits. Some of these are show photos, but this is just like the bulk of like what I am super, super comfortable doing behind the camera. Yeah. And then, I mean, music photography is like just such a passion of mine. It's so fun. And as someone who didn't get to grow up like going to shows and stuff, now like doing this for free, being paid to go, I'm like, hell yeah. So yeah, this is just something I'm super, super passionate about. And I feel like you get a very good like idea of like the vibe of my work from my style of concert photography. And also this is where I learned a lot of what I know about like lighting and composition and like movement, like how to shoot moving subjects and like capturing those like super quick moments that like some people just are missing.
Is there, quick question.
Yeah.
Is there any like artists that you've worked with in that industry that you work with often a lot? Like,
Yeah, most of them. So especially music photography, normally when you're hired by an individual artist, you're with them for a while. It's not usually like a one-off thing. Occasionally it'll be one-off things, but like G-Eazy I've worked with for almost 10 years. Like we just did something for MTV a couple months ago. He's still a good friend of mine. I toured with Olivia O'Brien for like 5-6 years. Love her. She's like a sister. I worked with Kiara for like 2 or 3 years. Usually it's a longer standing engagement. Yeah. And that's, you know, they become like family. You get to know them really well. And I feel like that's what makes a good photo is, you know, these people.
yeah, I can really see that coming across everyone, all of your subjects, which is like a really cold term for a human being.
Yeah.
But everybody has like, if they're looking back into your lens, they seem very comfortable and inviting. If they're looking away doing something, they still seem like, yeah, like I know you're there, but I'm really excited that you're here. Nothing looks like superposed and
Yeah,
forced.
it's all, I mean, this is all very like on the fly, candid. I feel like a huge part of also doing music and celebrity stuff is like you're a fly on the wall. Like if anyone asks, I'm barely in the room. I'm not talking, I'm not doing anything because I want to let everyone like have their space and just do whatever they need to be doing. And I'm just getting the photos. Yeah.
Yay.
So tying into that, this is what a lot of other people know me for, which is my portrait work. These are some, again, very recent portraits that I've done. And again, you get definitely like the vibe of my work through these. It's very soft and feminine and like super bright and clean. I love like a really sharp subject and a kind of like blurry, messy background. I like stuff that looks very natural and not posed. I really, really, really try and go for like natural light, natural moments, like all of that. Like, I just hate my work looking overproduced. The first thing that was really helping me kind of break out of these boxes that I found myself in was to define my style. And I was like, okay, my photos, I want them to look a certain way. I want to present my like brand as a photographer a certain way. Like if someone goes to my Instagram or my website, I want them to look at my work and be like, she took that. And that is something that I now get all the time. And it's like the biggest compliment to me that all of my work is like so in sync with each other. In terms of defining my style, my photos are very vibrant. They're feminine. They're candid and like fun and like not posed. Again, it's like very natural movements and stuff. I don't overproduce anything. And the other thing that you'll notice in a lot of my work, it's extremely symmetrical. Like I am super, super OCD about that. My horizon lines have to be completely straight. My subject has to be in the center of the frame, which I think seems like not that big of a thing. Like it seems very small. You're like, oh yeah, like straighten your horizon lines. If you look at my website or my Instagram or like anything, it's almost like serial killer-ish how like how optimized like all of these photos look when they're next to each other. And I think that really like defining my style, being super cognizant of it and recognizing like this is the image that I want to push out. And these are the type of clients I want to attract. And I want them to know like how their concept could look if I was shooting it, is like a really strong thing, because I feel like I take that into every different aspect and genre of photography that I do. Yeah.
Be consistent, y'all. No,
Being super
do.
consistent.
I'm barely there, but one day.
So we're going to talk about some of the things I did to like push myself out of my comfort zone. I think the thing that really like sparked a lot of this for me after just kind of doing whatever I wanted with like music and portrait photography, my friend Greg hit me up in 2018 and he had gotten an offer to do all of the like social photo stuff for YouTube and some of their like upcoming events. And he just like wasn't available and wasn't like as interested in it. But he was like, hey, I would really love to recommend you for this job because I know you like know a lot of YouTubers. I know you're like very like internet based and like involved in that. And I was like, yeah, I would absolutely love to do that. So he connected me with Google and they ended up hiring me for VidCon in 2018. And they loved me so much and I loved it so much that I worked with them for 2 years after that. The only reason we stopped was because of the pandemic, really. But just shooting events and like getting into, I don't really know how to put it. Basically, you have to go into something that's so like corporate and maybe not like super like cutesy, and you have to make it like beautiful and artistic and like Instagrammable. And for me, I think I was the perfect person for this because I went into this and knowing like a ton of YouTubers, a ton of social media people, I was very comfortable walking up to people and being like, hi, like, can I take a photo of you? Can I have you stand over here and do this and whatever? And they like the client really liked that I was social enough to like speak to these people and like get really good photos. But I really liked it in the sense that like I suddenly had so much access to this like really cool, like beautiful event. And I was just taking photos of a bunch of people that like, it was photos people were excited to see on social media the next day. It was something that was like, it was almost like concert photography where like some of it was like dark and like dimly lit and like, I don't know. And then I was doing portraits and stuff with flash, which reminded me of like what I do backstage at shows. And it just felt like very comfortable and familiar, but events were never something that I had seen myself doing. So I think at first I was a little nervous, a little hesitant. Also, like Google was like a gigantic client. So I was really glad after the first event that they were like, oh my God, like we're obsessed with you. And I was like, thanks. I'm obsessed with you too, guys. But that is what launched me into doing a ton of events. And now that is probably like 30 or 40% of my work at this point. Yeah.
Love that, love that, love that. Was there anything also that came out of that too that kind of pushed you even further to try something different? Or was that kind of like you finding your sweet spot as something that was familiar in some ways, but then it was still a nice environment to kind of learn in? Or like I
I
said,
feel like every single event that I did for them was very different. I did everything from like VidCon to creator summits to YouTube Black to YouTube Latin America to AAPI, like all of those events. And each one was a very different vibe. It was a very different aesthetic, different lighting situations and setups and stuff. But yeah, it felt comfortable in the sense that like even when I'm on tour, I wake up somewhere, the venue's different every day. Like we're doing something different. Like, and it just, I don't know. It felt like something I kind of knew how to do, but it was also like new for me. And so it was like challenging and like exciting.
yeah, I love that. I love that. I can see where that like creates that work and well, I won't skip ahead, spoil anything, but I can see how it's starting to come back and make that full circle.
Yeah.
Um, Again, quick plug, we have a lot of questions coming in. I love it. We're going to have a lot of time for questions at the end, so please continue sharing them. If I miss any, I'll try to get to them in the chat. All right.
So that event work led to me having this like huge portfolio of event stuff. If you guys go on my website, you can see a lot of my event work, but honestly, like my portfolio, I have so many events under my belt that like I don't even know what to do with all of these photos. But it really opened the door for me to work with huge brands constantly all the time. And I also wanted to touch on like one of the things here that I found with doing events is basically like when I was working with YouTube, I would tour for like 3 or 4 months and then I would come home and I would do a bunch of stuff for YouTube for 3 or 4 months. And then I would go back on tour and I would come back. And it kind of like gives you a financial freedom, especially working with bigger brands with bigger budgets. It's like all of a sudden I could do one job for one weekend. And then that leaves me so much extra time where I'm not worried about like booking shoots and getting work and like X, Y, and Z. And I just had so much time to like creatively like have fun with my friends and like set up shoots for fun and like, you know, all that stuff. And yeah, I feel like it opened a lot of doors for me creatively, financially, whatever, and just gave me like a lot of like breathing room. So now I really like picking up events because I'll do like one a week or something. And then the rest of my week, I'll try and fill with like more creative, like stuff that really like moves me and like fulfills me. So some of the events that I have done recently, these are just some of the photos, but there have been a bunch more. I did a wellness retreat for Ashley Tisdale's wellness brand, Being Frenchie. They took like 20 influencers to Laguna for like 3 days and asked me to come capture that whole experience. So literally being paid to go on a wellness retreat and like take stunning photos. And it was such a good time. And I had so much fun doing it. And again, that was just something that was like totally different for me, like shooting for like a wellness brand. And I really loved it and I had a great time and I made some great connections. I shot a lot of events for Twitter, RIP Twitter. But when they did have a budget, they were doing events and they were really cool and fun. And I work with Twitter a lot also on like the creator and like brand side. So I do influencer stuff with Twitter. But because they had known me as an influencer, they were hiring me to do photo stuff as well. And so that was really cool. And then I also do a lot more, I don't know, like niche kind of stylized stuff for small businesses, smaller brands, just people that I'm personally a fan of. So on the right, there's this beautiful like dinner tablescape. I shot an event for this brand called Olive Atelier, and they're really cool. They like import unique like Turkish, Greek, whatever vintage like pots and rugs and benches and like random stuff from overseas, and they sell them at their warehouse here in LA. And they did like a 1-year anniversary dinner and they'd asked me to shoot it. And I was like, oh my God, huge fan of your brand. Like, yeah, I'll be there. But it was because they had seen, I think they saw some other work that I did for like a launch event for like a swimwear brand. And they were like, oh my God, we love these. And I was like, I love you. So yeah, it's just kind of a lot of word of mouth, a lot of networking, a lot of these events too. I really strive to make connection with the people like working at the brands and stuff. Yeah, because if they like you, they ask you back, and that's great. And you know, talking to people, never overlook it. Networking is key. So this slide, I thought it was interesting to point out a couple photos from jobs that I went into being like, I don't know. But it came out good. So top left is a sunglasses campaign that I shot for my friends who run a brand called Posse. These ended up in Paper Magazine, and then Paper Magazine ended up hiring me for a bunch of stuff after that. And it was one of those things that was very last minute. They had just like hit me up and been like, hey, like we have this cool idea. We want to shoot these sunglasses. We're renting a stretch limo and we want to do it on Hollywood Boulevard, like in the middle of the night. And like, we want all flash. And as someone who doesn't shoot a ton of flash photography, like I do it here and there, but like, I was like, I don't know about a whole campaign with just flash, but they came out really good. There's some of like, I feel like the strongest photos in my portfolio from this year. And yeah, they ended up in Paper, and Paper loved them so much that they hired me to shoot like 2 or 3 events after that. So again, just an opportunity that I wasn't super sure about and went into and was just like, you know what? This went pretty well. So yeah, I continue to do that now. That's kind of like my thing at the moment. Second one, top middle, is my friend Madison Pettis, who I had met at a bar in 2019. And in 2020, she was offered like a brand deal with Savage Fenty, and she had hit me up being like, hey, like I just got this like 3-month offer from Savage, and I really want to make the first month's photos look really clean. Like, can I hire you to come take photos of me for this brand deal? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. But I'd never shot lingerie before. I didn't really know what I was doing, but you know, I shoot a lot of women and I know how to make like a pretty portrait. And I was like, we can make them like cool and artsy and like nice, because I'd seen what other people were posting for their Savage brand deals. And honestly, it was just like lazy, like iPhone work. And I was like, no, we can make this good. So these actually aren't the first ones we shot. These are more recent, but the first ones we shot like did extremely well and like went so viral. And at this point now, we have been shooting Savage for almost 3 years. So that was a 3-month contract that is now almost 3 years. And yeah, we just, you know, we got a good thing going and it's great. And now we're super good friends and that's super fun. And then top right, Nikita Dragon. I shot the Dragon Beauty campaign last year for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Nikita was really, really wanting to work with me. She'd hit me up and been like, I need you to take these photos. And I was like, okay. But then I got like the concept from the brand and they wanted like studio, like, you know, that like e-com type of lighting, which just, it's fine, but not really my style, not something I had ever really done before. So I was a little just like unsure of what I was going to do with that. But I went into it and, you know, I had taught myself the lighting equipment and like how I wanted the photos to look and stuff. And they ended up coming out so good. And they were like all over the website and their social and stuff last year. And some of the photos are still on the website. So I guess they liked them that much that they kept them up for a whole year. But that was just something that I feel like pushed me out of my comfort zone a little bit. And I ended up loving how those photos came out. And I think they're also now something that's different and like special in my portfolio just because I don't do a lot of lighting like that. So it's like an example of what I could be doing. Bottom left, shooting with Usher. That stressed me out a little bit just because his personal photographer had hit me and been like, hi, I'm not in town. Like, can you go out and like do some of these photos? It's only 5 looks. And I was like, okay, 5's a lot. So first of all, but when you go into a shoot like that, it is a little stressful just because obviously someone like Usher is so established and so famous and does this all the time, gets his photo taken all the time. He knows how he wants to look in a photo. He knows how many like shots he wants. Some people don't like being in front of a camera for a very long time. So before I meet a client like that, I'm like, oh, I never know like if, you know, if I'm asking them to do too much or like whatever. But I went on set. It was great. He was absolutely wonderful. The photos came out amazing. There are actually still some that I don't think have seen the light of day that are like my favorite ones ever, but just stuff like that. And I don't shoot a lot of men. And so I was just like a little like nervous, like wondering if he would like my style and stuff. But he did, and it was great. And it ended up being a super, super good experience. And they've asked me back a couple times. And yeah, so I feel like that was just another thing, jumping out of my comfort zone and making it work. The photo of Halsey before the Vanity Fair Awards. That one was just very like high pressure. Like I love shooting with Halsey, and she's absolutely wonderful. Probably the easiest person to shoot with. She's absolutely stunning, knows all her angles. Like you can't take a bad photo of Halsey. You can't, it's not possible. But her manager had hit me up that morning, and I was in Palm Springs, and he was like, hi, can you come back to LA and take these photos? And I said, on my way. So I drove back there. We only had like 30 minutes to get all of the stuff before she left for the Vanity Fair party. And we got a lot of really good photos. I had felt so like unprepared and stuff, but like in the back of my head, I was like, okay, like you're fine. Like you've gone into stuff that's like, you haven't been prepared for before. I just felt like, I don't know, maybe it was like very high stakes for me or something. But yeah, they ended up being great. They got like 2.8 million likes on Instagram or something. So I would consider that a win. The next one is this stage photo of Megan Thee Stallion. And you would think that I would go into all music photography being like super comfy and like feeling great. Not this one. So basically, that was my first time being on an in-house photo team at a festival, because normally when I'm shooting festivals or musicians or whatever, I'm working directly with the artist. Like I have a relationship with the artist, their manager, whatever. And this, I was on the in-house team at Bottle Rock Napa in like 2021. And it was just so stressful. I think it was a really good experience for me to have, because now I like know what that vibe is like. But I had only ever done festivals like with an individual artist. I'm there doing like backstage photos of their hair and makeup and stage photos and crowd photos and like for being on an in-house team. The stamina and like strength that takes is like otherworldly. Like I have so much respect for all the like Golden Voice and AEG photographers now, because I'm like, oh my God, like how do you do this? Like I almost died. And that was like a very small festival, but you're just running around constantly. You have to go from stage to stage. You don't really even get to see your own photos. Like someone else is editing them for you. And it was just like a lot. And I felt like I was just under so much pressure that weekend that like I was getting like okay stuff, but they weren't my favorite photos ever. And so now, like after having that experience, I think I would know what to prepare myself for if I were to ever do it again. But that also made me realize I think I do like doing festivals with individual artists, and I think I'm going to keep it that way. And then
that is super important. I think that's something I'm learning too, is like you also don't know if you're going to genuinely like enjoy something and take off with it.
totally.
So now you know, like, okay, maybe I can do it. Great.
Well, and I think that's a lot of people's like, especially music photographers, that's a lot of people's dream gig too, is to shoot like for a festival. And I think for some people, I'm sure it's absolutely fantastic, but just since that is not what I had like known and like started doing, for me, I was just like, I don't like this as much as like what I'm used to. And also like you don't own the rights to any of your photos and stuff too, which I didn't love. And just certain things I learned from that experience. And I was like, okay, like I'll just take that knowledge with me elsewhere, you know? And then that last photo is from this year at New York Fashion Week, from the Mira Palais show, which my photos from that went absolutely viral. And I was not even really supposed to be shooting that show. So that's funny. I was shooting, oh, can you go back? Yeah, I was shooting for my friend's skincare brand, because they were the skincare sponsor of the show. And in the morning, like when all the girls were getting their hair and their glam done, and I was just doing like backstage shots of them like using the skincare and like the eye patches and stuff. And as I was walking out, like after I finished, the girl was like, oh, are you coming back to shoot the show later? And I was like, oh, can I do that? And she was like, yeah, that wristband, like you can come back and shoot the show. And I was like, okay. So a couple hours later, I came back and I was like, I'm just going to shoot this New York Fashion Week runway show, like just like for fun, like just like for an experiment, you know? And I got there and I was immediately like, not intimidated, but just like a little like put off, because all of the New York Fashion Week, like runway photographers were like not super friendly. It seemed like they all knew each other. They all had their like predisposed like spots on the risers, which at the end of the runway, there's like media risers. and there's only room for like a certain amount of people, and they had just made themselves fit on the risers. So I have like one foot on a riser, like one leg up on a church pew. I'm like sitting like sideways, and they all had like flashes and like all these like lights and like weird like things that they were using. And I was like, I'm just going to shoot this the way I would shoot this. I felt really good about that. And I considered that a win. And I was like, you know what, push myself out of my comfort zone, and I won. So.
And like, as cheesy as this sounds, like, be you, for real, just be you, because no one else does what you do the way you do it.
Yeah.
So,
And I think it was also one of those things where it's just like, obviously, like I had never done that before. And I was like, oh, these could be like terrible, but they ended up coming out so good. And it's like, I wouldn't know if I hadn't like just put myself out there and tried it. So.
also, I'm curious if anyone in the chat, because something really cool. I saw this photo from Nesrin before I met her, and always loved it. So when I got to meet her, obviously I'm hearing more of the stories behind it. Let us know, what are some things that you're really excited about that you're seeing that you're like, oh, that really inspired me, I've seen it, or this is new to me, I didn't know that you could do all this. I'd love to know in the chat, just super curious. All right, moving along.
So we're going to talk a little bit about like broadening your horizons and kind of like what that means. It's obviously it's a very broad, like generic thing to discuss, but I just feel like it's been a constant thing in my career where I'm always like picking up these very random jobs, starting something new, trying something different. And I don't know, it's made me a very well-rounded photographer. Like a client can come to me with any concept whatsoever, and I'm like, yeah, I can shoot that. Like recently I've been shooting for Amex, which is really cool. I haven't really posted any of the work just because it doesn't have people in it, but it's very like, they want like warm, like, you know, candid, like photos of like hotels and like restaurants and all this stuff. And I've gone into it and been like, yeah, I can absolutely do that. And they're loving the work. And it's just something that I'm just doing on the side, like for fun. And yeah, so just like anything that's like broadening your horizons, getting out of your comfort zone, shooting different types of stuff.
Love that, love that. If you've attended a few of these sessions too, I feel like this is now a really important thing that we've heard from all of our amazing guest speakers like Nesrin and a few other folks. Hopefully you're seeing this whole connection like I am every time you've mentioned like opportunities where you've kind of gone out of your comfort zone. The results are obviously very successful and you're able to use them, you know, in your favor to get work that you want, or like you said, attract the clients that you want. People are familiar with your work as well, which is nice having that point of view. So just something really interesting to think about.
So my first thing is just like figuring out what moves you and where you find unique inspiration. I think that's a big thing, especially it ties into like defining your style, but like, what do you enjoy shooting? What do you have like a unique perspective on that like it just sets you apart from other people? And I think figuring that out and like honing in on that is like a really, really important aspect of this. And with that, tying into that, building a cohesive portfolio. So these are all like a little bit older photos of mine. These are like 2016, 2017. And obviously, like, I think my new stuff looks a little bit different, but you still get that like very symmetrical vibes, kind of dreamy, ethereal, feminine, whatever. And then when you go on my website, you see all of this stuff together, my old stuff, my new stuff, it just like works. And I think something like that is really important because like I said, like a client can go on your website and see examples of all of your work and like imagine their shoot or their concept or their whatever in like your style. So building a cohesive portfolio that really just shows people like what you're all about and what's going on is like probably my number one tip for like just marketing yourself.
And would you also argue that you can apply that line of thinking to any creative practice or any type
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, you just need that like that signature, like something, which we'll get into, but so yeah, my big thing that I feel like has made a huge difference for me is like using light, color, and composition to establish your style. When I talked about like defining my style earlier, everything's very symmetrical. The subject is in the center of the frame. It's super vibrant colors. It's very like warm tones and natural lighting. Like there's just something about my work that like works together. Like nothing really looks super weird and out of the ordinary. Like even this headshot that I did for Maddie Bragg that's on the left, we did high flash. She wanted like these really cool like high flash headshots because she is a chef. And so I shot her with like a lot of food and wine and stuff. And we did a lot of high flash, but like even with the way I edited it, it still works with all of my other like natural light photos. And so yeah, just knowing how you can make your style adapt to like any situation is key.
Yes.
And using VSCO to create a signature edit. A signature edit is like my bread and butter. It's like the main thing. Basically, I edit everything generally the same. Hot tip, I use the VSCO Lightroom preset pack from 2015. I don't think you can get it anymore. I think it's super, super discontinued, but I've had it for so long that now it's like just such a good base for my edits. I'll like kind of pick and choose like little aspects from each of those and kind of tie them in with my edits. And it's just like, it creates like, I don't know, like just a good base for everything. Obviously you're tweaking stuff. It depends on the lighting. It depends on the photo. It depends on like how you need it to look in the end, but like having a good base for your edits and like knowing what you want your photos to look like across the board, like as a standard, is like the first thing you need to hone on with editing. And using VSCO, I literally edit all of my iPhone photos in VSCO. I edit all of my Instagram stories. I do any like tweaks to even like my professional photos before I'm posting in VSCO, because I love like you can copy and paste stuff. So all of my stuff is like super, super, super cohesive because I'm copying and pasting the same stuff. And what was I going to say?
Yeah, the copy pasting. And then I'm sure people already know this, but this is, I think, also super helpful to speed up the process. But in case you didn't know, when you build your recipes also, you could reorder your stack and have like the top filters or tools that you need always to use over and over, and you could just plug it. Another hot tip I would suggest is using spaces as like a nice playground if you're not ready to share.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and I use VSCO all the time. And I also feel like it's really funny because something that I get from a lot of my clients when I'm doing influencer stuff is they're like, oh my God, like your stories look so good. Like everything just looks so clean. And it's usually iPhone stuff I'm posting for stories. I'm editing all my videos in VSCO. I'm doing all my photos. I have like a saturation, sharpness, grain, A6 thing going on that I'm just copying and pasting on everything. And yeah, it gives you like this very like branded look, you know, like people will look at my photos and they'll be like, oh, she took that, even if it's like an iPhone photo, if it's a professional photo, like it all looks cohesive and the same. So kind of just deciding what you want your work to look like and how you can keep replicating that in like different styles.
Love that.
And then last tip, and I would say this is the most like tangible, real world one, networking. And I hate that word and it's so annoying, but you have to do it. Reaching out to people in other fields is like pretty much the way that I have gotten so many of my jobs. It's like word of mouth, networking, emailing, DMing, talking to people in real life, people I find interesting, or asking friends and peers for intros when it's appropriate, especially in LA. Like if you really want to work with someone or a certain brand, you know someone who knows someone who knows someone who can get you in with them. And just like asking for those intros and not being afraid to put yourself out there. Obviously, sometimes people are going to say no, or they're not going to email you back or whatever. But you never know until you try. And my last thing is, I learned this when I was working in music photography, but it just really, really, really goes a long way to be like a nice, communicative, easygoing person, because people would be so much more eager to work with you and ask you back again. And working in music, I learned this because I really wanted to tour. And I think a lot of music photographers are very eager to tour and they just don't quite understand that like when artists are picking people to tour with, you need to choose someone you can live with on a bus for 3 months. And some people are maybe a good photographer, but like not your favorite person. And so you just need to be someone that is super easygoing, super likable, super kind, like not weird. And that will literally take you so far. So in summary, just being nice to people.
It's a nice reminder for the world right now.
Right? Yeah.